Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. Josh of Severe Weather. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. I'm a meteorologist in Raleigh, North Carolina. I hope everybody's had a great weekend so far. We are staying busy in the tropics, not this upcoming week, but beyond that, as we head towards November, a busy final month and a final push here to get some more storms going, unfortunately, for those of us here in the Caribbean. So I appreciate everybody joining me today. If you could like this video and subscribe at the end. If you like what you see, I very much appreciate that. Let's see what's going on here. Over the coming week, we've got the potential for not just one, but maybe two separate systems to develop here towards next weekend, one of which has some pretty decent potential to strengthen over warm waters of the Western Caribbean, another which could be a nuisance system that is a little bit more uncertain at this point, but something we need to keep an eye on for the Virgin Islands, the Leeward Islands, Puerto Rico, and maybe eventually the Bahamas and Bermuda as well. So nothing is forming yet. So that is adding to the challenge of this, but we continue to see signs of what should be an enhanced phase of what's called the Madden-Julian Oscillation, and that's what's going to get the Central American gyre to develop additional storms. And we've seen that multiple times this season already. Helene came from a gyre that formed here back in September. We've got the next phase of that coming through here shortly. But right now, we're pretty good shape here across the Atlantic Basin. In the Pacific, we do have a Hurricane Kristy, which was a Category 5. That is now quickly fading as wind shear increases and cooler water is in the way of the system, so it will not survive another day. And we do have an area we're going to watch here that may form south of Kristy into our next system in the Pacific. In the Western Pacific, that's where things are busiest. In fact, we do have Tropical Storm Trammy, which is going to weaken as it moves towards the Vietnam coast here at the end of the weekend and then eventually loop back out and fall apart. But this new system, Kong Ray, is beginning to show signs of quicker organization and is expected to turn right through the Philippine Sea and eventually threaten perhaps Taiwan, perhaps Japan, and certainly Okinawa here. That is expected to recurve and may actually play a role in the weather across North America here in about 10 to 15 days, as recurving typhoons often lead to stronger troughs and stronger pulses in the jet stream. Here's a look at the Atlantic Basin right now. Pretty quiet. You can see we've got some flare-up of thunderstorms here in the Northwest Caribbean. Yesterday, we had more action than we do today in the Southwest Caribbean, so nothing organizing quickly, and we have fast easterly trades here. So not in a favorable spot to see development at this point. The Gulf is still pretty quiet. We do have a little bit of moisture that will eventually spread northeast towards Florida, but nothing that I expect will develop. And the Western Atlantic, all is good here. We've got a boundary that is going to sit down here and continue to spin up some thunderstorm action south and east of Bermuda, maybe something to watch here in Puerto Rico and Hispaniola and the Turks and Caicos. As we head into next week, this area is going to be monitored as wind shear starts to come down. And we've got a boundary here that is moving through the Tennessee Valley into the Appalachians, and that will put an end to the warm weather today in the southeast and bring us some cooler temperatures tomorrow. Farther out in the Atlantic, strong westerlies here creating wind shear up and over these thunderstorms, and so we're just going to have rain but nothing developing out of these. So that is good news there. Here's a closer look at Central America and the Western Caribbean. A couple of areas that we're monitoring at this point. This flare up near Belize is just going to dump heavy rain. That's really it. No development expected from that. Models are starting to show this area in here to be the area to watch here next week, but we've got several days due to that strong east-northeasterly shear, and we're going to have to watch the Pacific side of this as well, where wind shear is lower than it is on the Atlantic side. So lots of rain coming for Central America this week, but nothing that should threaten us, at least for the short term. Now, in the longer term, that will change. This map shows us areas of rising air and sinking air. The brown is sinking, so that is unfavorable. So today, unfavorable in the Atlantic, but favorable across the Pacific. And in fact, this is where Hurricane Kristy is right now. And as we move this on into time, you're going to see that the browns still stick around here through the weekend, but eventually we start to see some divergence aloft and some more favorable motion in the upper atmosphere. On the Pacific side, at least early next week, but as we move on into time here, later next week, around Thursday and Friday, we in fact start to see more rising motion here across the tropics as we head into a more favorable phase for development. So the area to initially watch is over in here, but there's a second area in here that we're going to also have to keep an eye on. And the next two names on the list are Patty and Raphael. Here's a look at what's called the Madden-Julian Oscillation. This shows pulses that go along the equator from west to east. They rotate across the entire globe and typically are less favorable phases for development in the Atlantic are over in here. So we've seen relatively quiet weather over the last week as we've been in unfavorable phases. But as we move along here towards phase 7 at the end of this month, and in particular phase 8 early next month, we have a significant MJO pulse coming across. And this is going to enhance thunderstorm development across the Western Caribbean and over time farther to the east, maybe into the central Atlantic by the 9th or 10th. So this actually changes pretty significantly for us and leads us to believe that conditions, in fact, do favorable more storms as we head into this phase in here, basically the end of 6 into 7, 8, 1, and maybe 2. The time frame for that is going to be probably October 30th or 31st at the earliest, November 2nd at the latest, and probably continuing all the way into the second and maybe third week in the month of November. Things certainly favor that. So that's what we're going to be watching. Another thing to keep in mind is that the Caribbean doesn't magically cool down in November like the rest of the Atlantic does. And because water temperatures have been running on the warm side all season long, all year long, we still have a lot of potential storm fuel here if something does form, for something to form quickly and develop quickly in the right upper level environment. And that means we need to have rising air. We can't just have the warm water. We have to get something to spin up. But you'll see the Northwest Caribbean and this area south and east of Jamaica and Haiti are both very favorable for any storm to form to strengthen. Here's a look at what the European ensemble is showing, and don't get too caught up in this, but as we move on and move away from Central America, you will see two areas that we're monitoring in the Atlantic here for potential development. This area is north of Panama. This is going to be in about a week. And this area is north of St. Croix in Puerto Rico. This is expected to kind of slowly move northward. This area is expected to kind of move northwestward. And we could actually see a Pacific storm as well heading in this direction. So we've got about 6 or 7 days before things will start to perk up. But you'll see they are expected to do that. And then as we move on into the longer term, obviously these chances do drop as a certainty and skill level for forecast does come down at that point. It doesn't mean there won't be anything there. It just means there's fewer ensembles that show something hanging on that long. Here's a European extended range forecast. You can see a 40 to 50% chance of something developing during the next week coming up. And up here north of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, also a 10 to 20% chance. And we've got an increased chance on the Pacific side as well of a tropical cyclone. I'm not sure what's going on here, but maybe we'll have to watch that boundary as it stays over marginally warm waters in the north central Atlantic. Now, this is up through next Monday, or this upcoming Monday through the following Monday. As we go past that, you'll see chances start to climb over more of the northern Caribbean, as well as the southwest Atlantic and even the far southern Gulf of Mexico. This is not a great chance for Florida, but it is somewhat of something we need to keep an eye on here with that 5 to 10% risk here for South Florida. I don't think the northern Gulf has to worry about this, and probably not the southeast coast, but more likely Cuba, Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Central America, the Yucatan, South Florida, and the Bahamas needs to be watching. Also Hispaniola and possibly Puerto Rico and even Bermuda at that point. The following week, you'll see chances are going to come back down, but we're not potentially finished just yet. There's still possibilities here in the southwestern Caribbean for the second full week of November. And then the week before Thanksgiving, we're still potentially not finished. There's still some chance of some form of development here as we're still in a favorable phase at this point. And you can see that from this forecast made a few days ago, that pretty decent confidence here, at least a 40% chance of something forming here in the Western Caribbean. Sorry for the red clashing here, but this is the other area we're watching, and we're going to have to watch the Pacific. As we get beyond that to the 6th of November, so right after Election Day, we still have that chance in the Southwest Atlantic and in the Western and Central Caribbean. So not just the model showing something, but forecasters are indicating there's some potential for something coming up. Now, having said all of that, the National Hurricane Center still is not ready to act on anything. And I know I picked on them a little bit yesterday, but in my opinion, I think we need to start taking a look at some possible development areas, one in here and one in here. Now, it's going to be closer to that 7-day than certainly the 5 or the 4-day. But I think that maybe they are being a little bit too conservative here, and I'm going to leave it right there. You can see why here. If you look at the wind shear forecast, it's high right through this weekend across the Gulf and the Western Caribbean. But as we go into next week, around Thursday and Friday, we see a significant drop in that overall wind shear, and more so by the end of next weekend and beyond to about Election Day. We do have lower than average wind shear. In fact, it's below 10 knots here in the Southwest Caribbean and below 30 knots in the Southern Gulf, and also pretty low here as well near the islands. So This is not the lowest wind shear we'll ever see, but it is low enough to support a tropical system if this forecast is correct. And you can see as we move this along a couple more days, it doesn't just go right back up either. It stays fairly low due to the fact that we're in that low wind shear timeline, due to the fact that the MJO is heading into a phase 8 and a phase 1, which favors rising air and lower wind shear. And we're also in a bit of a La Nina as well. Not a strong one, but at least heading in that direction. And that also means we typically will have more storms later in the season coming into that La Nina than, say, if we were in an El Nino. So just something we're going to continue to monitor here over the coming days. I will show you all some ensembles. These are some possibilities here, and the areas in blue are the areas where pressure is going to be lower. And there's really not much going on here through the middle of the week, according to the GFS, but there are several areas of lower pressure beginning to show up on our models here next Wednesday and Thursday. These numbers indicate surface pressure, and a tropical storm would have pressure somewhere between 990 millibars, so that would be the 90, and about 1,005, which would be a 05. They cut off the first two numbers here. So right now we have some solutions showing lower pressure on Thursday. As we take this on into time, we also have some solutions showing lower pressure here north of Hispaniola on next Saturday. So a week from today, the majority of our guidance here is indicating at least something is going to get forming in this area east of Nicaragua. There's a little bit less of a chance, but something could also form here and track west-northwest or northwestward here to the north of Puerto Rico. As we go beyond that, you will see the solutions are going to diverge. We have some that go northwest. We have others that stay here near Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. And we have several that are actually aimed towards South Florida and the Bahamas. Not a lot, but some at this point. As we go to the end of next week, or the following week, I should say, we're not completely finished here either. You can see we still have some solutions showing some tropical mischief at this point. So that is the GFS. Here's the European ensemble forecast, and it's not as aggressive, not surprisingly, but it does too show development in two areas here. You can see probably around Monday to 3rd or 4th is when we see more solutions here. So the GFS is about 3 or 4 days quicker on development than the European, but we still have several solutions showing something down here. We also have solutions showing something up in here, and I don't know which is going to pop first, but these are the two areas that we are going to have to watch. As we move on to Election Day and then the following day, Wednesday, we have somewhat of a northward motion here, but nothing affecting Florida, more likely staying in the Caribbean or across the Bahamas. So the European does not pull this northward like the GFS is in its ensembles. And finally, for the Canadian here, this is a good mix of the two, I think. Again, we have nothing forming before Thursday, but then towards Friday and Saturday, we start to see some lowering of pressure. This particular model doesn't have much up in here. It's more gung-ho on this system here. But you can see here anywhere from the Bahamas and Cuba all the way down to near Nicaragua and Honduras by this time next week. And then into the following week here, we continue to have lower pressure. So this area is going to have a lot of rain, regardless of what kind of system forms and how intense it gets. We're going to see a lot of rain, and I will show that to you here in just a little bit. Take a look at this here. This is an average of all of the models, and you can see here 1, 2, 3, 400 millimeters of potential rain over the next 15 days. 400 millimeters, I can't even do the math in my head, but we're talking 15, 20 inches of rain potentially here near Belize in the Southwest Caribbean, maybe even in Jamaica, high amounts as well across parts of Cuba, as well as Hispaniola, maybe Puerto Rico. So it's definitely looking very wet in the Caribbean over the next couple of weeks. Here's a plot of all the GFS ensembles, and this is over the next 10 days. And generally speaking, here is the spread. Obviously, there's some models that go this way. There's a lot more that are heading in this direction and some that keep it buried down in here. This is our other feature that we're watching, generally speaking, either this way or this way, and probably a shorter-lived storm at that point. That's the GFS. Here's the European, and this goes out 10 days, and you can see it's slower to develop, but it does have some solutions that are in this area. Nothing, though, coming up towards Florida at this point. And the European is more aggressive with this first feature here, which honestly could make more sense. This one may end up being Patty, and this one may end up being Raphael, assuming they both develop. But you can see here, they're going to stay separate enough to not have to form into anything combined. But if this one forms first, it could influence where this one ends up forming and going. The two may compete with each other. Here's the operational GFS from this afternoon. And it continues to be more aggressive than the other models. You'll see development by Thursday and Friday in the Southwestern Caribbean. No longer is this going up into the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, the latest GFS takes it northeast, even east of Jamaica, all the way over to Dominican Republic, and then through the Turks and Caicos by the 4th and 5th. And instead of coming west, there's a huge area of high pressure and a front down in here that blocks it. It's got nowhere to go but slowly to the north and east. Obviously, in Bermuda, that's going to be something you'll need to be watching at this point. But it's in no rush. It may sit out here for a while. So that's the GFS. The Canadian has not been as aggressive as the GFS, but the latest run is starting to pick up on this as well. You can see here, not until about Friday or Saturday next week, but same area is being monitored here, the Southwestern Caribbean. This is next Sunday. And you can see it does, in fact, have a strengthening hurricane south of Jamaica here on Election Day. It also has the feature out here as well, albeit weaker. So two systems here. This one, I don't know which one forms first. I don't know which one gets the name Patty, but regardless, we have to watch both. And we're also going to have to watch the Pacific as well. Just lots of rain coming. The Icon model does not go out as far as that European, but it continues to have kind of two separate areas we're watching. It's not as strong, though. It's got a weaker system next Saturday here and a weak or moderate system here north of the islands here as well next Saturday. And again, it's a race to scoop up the next name. Finally, we're going to look at the European from earlier, and this one continues to take longer to develop systems. In my opinion, it's been too slow to do that all season long, so it's not the trusted model, but we still have to give it some credit. Doesn't really have much low pressure here, but it does have our low pressure here next weekend to the north of Hispaniola. So that's what we're looking at for the operational models at this point. We'll also show you the AI forecast from the European, which is done better than the operational. And you can see here, it actually develops this system first next weekend. And then following that, we just don't get development down here in the Southwest Caribbean. It takes this system and actually develops it and maybe threatens Bermuda here the following weekend. So that would be 2 weeks from today. A lot can still change. Here's the Pacific. Things are getting more active in the Eastern Pacific. This is Hurricane Kristy weakening significantly due to all this wind shear. But this area behind it does need to be watched because that's going to go south of that area of wind shear. And we're going to still have to watch things over here closer to Central America. It doesn't take much to get something to form this time of the year. Here's Kristy for you, looking a lot more disheveled today due to that wind shear out of the southwest. And the central thunderstorms just are now being advanced well to the north of the low-level center. And so we're expecting this to be a tropical storm tonight and a remnant low by the end of the weekend. You can see the intensity forecast definitely going downhill. Tropical storm Trammy. This is one we need to watch here in Vietnam. 60 to 70 mile per hour storm starting to go through some flare-ups here over this warm water. And the original track was taking this inland, then it took it shy of the coast. Now it's expected to go just inland near Da Nang and then turning back out and falling apart here as a remnant low. Lots of rain coming to Vietnam. But it is going to stay south of Hainan in China. And here you can see that on the GFS ensembles. And then Kongray, this one does have a bright future ahead of it. It's not there yet, but a tropical storm, lowering wind shear, and this is expected to strengthen significantly early next week into a stronger typhoon. This would be 130 mile per hour, equivalent of a Category 4 coming up on these islands here between Taiwan and Kadena here. So there's a lot of spread still. This could go farther west towards Taiwan. They've been hit already this year. It could end up going right over Okinawa and Kadena, and it could recurve and maybe affect southwestern Japan as well. China's certainly still in the potential window here, but the stronger storm solutions generally recurve it here near or just to the south of Japan. There are some solutions, though, that are still going more westerly here between Philippines and Taiwan. So we're going to have to watch that one closely. All right, stateside here, pretty quiet day. You can see we've got another storm bringing heavy moisture into the northwest, in particular British Columbia. We have a weak disturbance crossing the northern part of the country, and we've got a boundary here that's got limited moisture with it moving into the eastern United States. We're not going to see much rain from this front, but it will get much cooler here. Winds are going to crank up tomorrow, especially in New England. A cold night tomorrow night, chilly day on Monday. But that is fleeting. We already have warm air returning very quickly into the plains here early next week. Strong winds expected in here, higher fire danger, and maybe near record warmth as this system approaches from the west. Unsettled and cool across the west, heavy mountain snow possible, and then our first snowstorm of the year possible in the Dakotas and northwest Minnesota by Tuesday into Wednesday. We also could see a wintry mix here across parts of Quebec as that chilly air is slow to move out. But look how warm we look here for Wednesday. And for those heading out Thursday evening, pretty mild on the East Coast and in the Southeast. We do have the potential for some rain and thunderstorms where we need it the most across Arkansas, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Western PA. Not at the best time here for those who have kids that are heading out, but the rain is needed, and then things will cool down some and should dry out in time for next weekend. So longer term, it's going to stay warm for a few more weeks here, especially next week. And then we see a slight cool down coming next weekend in the east, warming right back up behind it. But the trend here towards the middle of the month of November is going to be for cooler weather across the east, especially with that recurving typhoon in place. Rainfall here over the next week, not much in the east, but as we move this along here into next weekend, we will start to see, let me go back one model run for you. The 6E is not in all the way. You can see though, although it's dry in the east, we do start to see more rainfall here later next week across the plains and the central U.S., and that will start to sneak eastward into the northeast at least. Now, the southeast is not going to benefit much from these next couple of fronts as it stays dry here into the next 2 weeks. Snow totals, real fast. As you would expect, the northwest seeing snow, north central Canada seeing snow, another decent storm here by Tuesday. And take a look at this. We may see a few inches up into Minnesota and Ontario as we get to next Wednesday and early Thursday. And then we warm back up, and then the next cold shot brings the potential for snow across the northeast, mainly in New England, as we get to about the 6th and 7th of November, and then it warms right back up after that. So we're obviously going to have a lot of time to watch that. Things could certainly change. I've been in this business a long time, and I will tell you that what you see today may change here in a few days, but I'm going to do my best to keep everybody on top of things. So I appreciate your time today, and as always, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, for giving me this blessing and this opportunity to bless other folks. This is my assignment from God to share the good news and to share the weather with you all. John 16:31, Jesus replied, "A time is coming, and in fact has come, when you will be scattered, each to your own home. You will leave me all alone. Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me. I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." We are in troubling times, but the good news is that our Father still loves us. Even though in the world we're going to be dealing with trouble, we're going to be dealing with storms, we're going to be dealing with all kinds of things, Jesus still has overcome the world. And there'll be a day when your time on earth is gone and you'll have the opportunity to live with him eternally in heaven. But you have to make that choice and understand that despite the darkness here, there is a light shining brightly through that. And Jesus is coming again. And that is the good news. That is what excites me every day. It's knowing that my days will be difficult, but when my days are done, there will be eternal joy because the angels in heaven will be rejoicing. If you have any prayer requests, please list those for me, and I will spend some time in prayer for you this weekend. I will be off tomorrow, and I'll catch you all again here on Monday afternoon. Have a blessed weekend. See ya.